Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From Huntington Beach, California, I'm Dave Nassetti, and you're on the Caregiver Dave Show with my lovely co-host, Adrian Gruberg from the caregiverspace.org. And we're coming to you live 24/7. And we are so proud to be voted #1 podcast of the top 50 on Player FM, as well as #2 podcast of thousands on Caring Village, and #3 podcast out of thousands on FeedSpot. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today, don't we, Adrian?
Yes, we do.
We have Dr. Deb Matthews, and we're going to talk about hormones, all about them, why you want them, why you don't want them, why you need them, why you wish you didn't have them, etc., etc. You see where we're going on this. So, but before we get started, I do want to thank last week's guest. If I can remember who last week's guest was, but it was a great show, and you can go to healthylife.net. I think it was the president of healthylife.net, Linda McKenzie. Remember her, Adrian?
Yeah.
It was a great show. She's a great guest. And you can hear this show and all our shows on healthylife.net as well. So, Dr. Deb, welcome to the show. Finally, after 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, how long has it been?
It's been a few years, and I've heard so much about it, and I'm so glad to finally be here.
Yes, and Dr. Deb and I share the same mentors, so we do a lot of the same things. Although she has made me look bad. She's been on 80 television shows, and I've only been on 40. So I, being a competitive person, I'm trying to catch up. So, Dr. Deb, first, before we even talk about your book, I have heard your story, and it is an incredible story, and I love the way you tell it at Harvard and at NASDAQ and at Carnegie Hall and at all those different places. So why don't you just tell Adrian and I and the world your story? Why are you Dr. Deb, and how did this happen to you?
Well, I used to be a regular old ordinary doctor, but I didn't always feel that good. I remember on my 10th anniversary, my husband and I were out for dinner together, and we were enjoying a lovely meal and a lovely glass of wine. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I remember looking at him and thinking, who is this barbarian? And what was I thinking marrying this man? And he's a great guy. He's a great dad. He's my knight in shining armor. I don't know where these crazy thoughts were coming from. And my poor kids, I had no patience. And, I remember one time one of the boys was kicking the soccer ball against the living room wall, and I could hear that thwap, thwap. And my head started spinning around, and steam was coming out of my ears. And I said, "Get the ball out of my house now!" And I'll be really honest and tell you, that exorcist voice really worked. Those kids moved so fast. I feel so guilty because that's not the kind of mom that I wanted to be. And it was so confusing because nothing in my medical training helped me understand what was happening to me. And eventually, my husband, who really, I'm lucky, he's a patient man, but, he started to get a little fed up. And he found a book that he thought I ought to read. And it was a book written by Suzanne Summers. And I know that you've interviewed Suzanne. But to me as a doctor, I don't want to get my information from a celebrity. I didn't want to hear from Chrissy Snow. I didn't want to read the book. But I knew that I had to do something. And so I did read it, and that book has changed my entire life. Because when I read about the women in the book who were just like me and how much better they felt when they got their hormones back into balance, it allowed me to open my mind. And it allowed me to see that there were important things they didn't teach me in medical school, and there were places that I could go to learn a different approach. And so I was able to get my hormones back in balance. I got my energy back. My kids got their mom back. My husband got his wife back. And I got my life back. But I couldn't go back to just writing prescriptions all day long because it just didn't make sense anymore. So now for the last 14 years, I've been helping men and women get their hormones back in balance so they can feel great, often get off prescription drugs, and love the way they feel.
Wait a minute. Men and women? You mean men have hormone problems?
They sure do. And you know, when you say hormones, what most people are going to think about is like menopausal hormones, right?
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot more that goes on that we can talk about that really makes a big difference.
Are we talking about testosterone and stuff like that? These commercials I see on TV, this guy in midlife crisis is, pushing weights and he's losing his hair and the girls don't look at him anymore. That kind of hormones?
Well, that's another one of them that's important. And stress, right, if we're talking about caregiving, that affects hormones too. So we got a whole bunch of hormones that we can talk about. Okay.
Well, first let's talk about how you are different than other doctors. What kind of a doctor are you? Some kind of quack or what?
Some people might think so. So the way that I practice medicine is called integrative medicine. And what that means is that we're taking the best of natural medicine and the best of regular medicine, like you're used to at your regular doctor. And what we'd like to do is we try to start with natural things first and save our use of prescription medicines for when we really need them. And what I feel like is in medical school, we tend to go a little too far sometimes to just always relying on prescriptions. And even as patients, right, if you don't feel good, you want to go to your doctor to get a pill to make you feel better. But a lot of times those medicines are kind of just putting a Band-Aid on your symptom. They're not really making you well. And so if we could help you to get well, then you wouldn't need the medicines.
That's right. And by the way, my wife is blowing you kisses. She sees you on the screen. And she says, I know her.
Of course.
So, okay, so you're not a quack. That's good. And why do you practice medicine the way you do?
Yeah, I believe that there is so much that we can do to help people become well. And when you feel well, you have better energy, more creativity, right? You sleep better. It's easier to maintain your weight. And if you have people who depend on you, you need your health, right? You speak about this all the time. If you yourself aren't well, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't take care of the people who depend on you. So instead of just treating diseases with drugs, I feel really passionately about helping people become the best version of themselves in terms of their health, and having healthy, balanced hormones is an important piece of that.
Now, we're talking to hormones. We're talking to caregivers. And caregivers have stress, as you said. In fact, 30% of them actually die before their loved ones do because of the stress. And the lucky ones that don't die, well, they become sicker than the ones they're caring for, hospitalized, eventually need a caregiver of their own. So, it's not pretty. That only leaves about 10% of the caregivers who are kind of healthy. What can we do to help them deal with this stress? You can't get rid of the stress, right? Stress is here to stay. So you got some tips or techniques to de-stress?
I do. So maybe can we talk a little bit about cortisol, and then we can talk about what to do to make cortisol better? Because
first, tell me what is cortisol.
Yes, cortisol is your stress hormone. And so when you are stressed, cortisol goes up, and that's what helps you cope with stress. So that's good.
Is that fight or flight stuff?
Kind of like your fight or flight, exactly. Like you get an adrenaline rush, and cortisol is kind of like long-acting adrenaline. In the short term, it's good. But when you have stress day in and day out, when it becomes chronic stress, then cortisol can become chronically elevated. And here's where the problem starts. Cortisol is an aging hormone. It's a wear and tear hormone. So it shrinks your brain. It pushes you to dementia and diabetes and osteoporosis, all the things that nobody wants. And so when we are under chronic stress and our cortisol level goes up, that's what pushes those negative health implications that you're talking about. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have healthy ways of balancing the stress in our lives in order to protect our body from the harmful effects of cortisol. And the good news is there actually are things that we can do that are really helpful and really important, even if you can't eliminate the stresses. And so one of those things is breathing exercises. So just simple, slow, deep breaths in and out, especially belly breathing, where your belly is moving up and down with the breath. That actually triggers the opposite of the fight or flight response. It triggers the relaxation response. It allows cortisol to go down. It allows our body to shift back out of that, fight or flight. And that can be very, very helpful. And the trouble is, I think, it's so simple that it doesn't even sound like it would work. It seems a little woo-woo, but breathing is really, really powerful medicine, and it actually can help to protect your body from the harmful effects of stress.
We believe in breathing here at Caregiver Dave. You heard our theme song, Keep On Breathing. It's very important, but even I forget to breathe. I just took a great big breath as you were talking, and it felt so good. You like to breathe, Adrian?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What's the alternatives, right?
Another one of my favorite, if I can tell you one more tip,
yes,
I think that you're going to agree with this one too, and I am sure you have talked about this on your show, but another really important one that might be sometimes difficult for caregivers is to feel gratitude. Because when you feel gratitude, your body can't feel anxious, bitter, angry, fearful at the same time. And so no matter how bad things are, you can always, if you think to do it, if you make a point, you can always think of 3 things that you're grateful for. It can be memories from the past. It can be the fact that it's a beautiful sunny day today. We can always find something even in sort of dark moments. And that also is really powerful medicine. We don't have any drug or any pill that can do what gratitude can do.
An attitude of gratitude is very, very good. I have this thing that talks about attitude, how it's, 90%, 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. So it is so true. And, is the glass half empty or half full? That's an old analogy, but it is so true. And a lot of this you learned from your story, from the hard knocks of experience, right? They didn't teach you this in medical school, did they?
Yeah, really not. So let's just say that somebody who comes into their doctor and they're complaining, I'm tired all the time. I can't sleep at night. I'm feeling depressed. Can't control my weight keeps going. I'm achy joints. Whatever the symptoms are, what we as a doctor are taught to do is we're thinking to ourselves, what can I do to fix this? An antidepressant, a sleeping pill, an anti-inflammatory pill. We're kind of running through the list in our head, thinking about what prescription can we write. So there are certainly times when medicine is really important and we need it, right? I mean, I'm not knocking medicines, but when this is about, how you're feeling, how stress is impacting your body, there's really no pill for that. But there are things that we can do to help protect ourselves from the harmful effects of stress. And so it's really important.
Wow. Absolutely. So, what do your peers think of you? The people that you went to medical school with, and what kind of a doctor did you go to medical school to become, first of all?
So originally, what I wanted to do was something like preventive and health-oriented, and so I ended up doing pediatrics, if you can believe that. And the reason that I did pediatrics is because that's a lot of like prevention and tips for parents, and I did enjoy it. But the reality is I spent a lot of my day writing prescriptions for asthma inhalers and ADD medicines and antibiotics for ear infections, right? It was prescription. And when I first was going through my own issues and learning about this more natural approach to things, this was back in 2006, and I had no idea how somebody could do this for children, right? How do you get children to eat healthier or take a vitamin? It just didn't even seem remotely possible to me. So I shifted to work with adults with the idea that if I could help, parents and grandparents be healthier, there would be trickle down to their children. So now I have friends who are integrative pediatricians who help children to come off their eczema medicines and, their asthma inhalers and things like that. But many of my peers, the other doctors, when I first started doing this, thought that it was a little odd. They didn't really know what to think about me. They probably thought that a lot that I was doing was kind of maybe a little crazy but
you were going to become a chiropractor or something.
Yeah, but what I see is over the years, things are shifting. I used to tell people to take vitamin D. Well, now lots of doctors tell their patients to take vitamin D. I was telling people to take fish oil capsules. Well, now lots of doctors are seeing that omega-3s from the fish oil are actually really good for our health. So there's been a big shift. And so now it's not accepted by everybody. There are some doctors who are still very conventional in their thinking, but I see it changing, and more and more doctors are coming in droves to practice medicine this way because they can see that their patients aren't really getting better. They keep coming back, and then it's more prescriptions, and the prescription list is this long, and they know that there's got to be a better way. And so this is just sort of common sense medicine, is what can we do to get healthier so you don't need that whole list of pills.
Sure. Now, you used to be in pediatrics, so I want to ask you this question because my grandson is autistic, and I was shocked at the statistics. What was it, like 20 years ago, maybe 1 in 100,000 kids would become autistic. Now it's like 1 in 1,500 or some crazy number like that. What's going on?
There are a lot of people that are trying to find the answers, but it doesn't look like it's genes, because our genes change very, very slowly over many, generations. But it looks like probably the environment is playing a role. So toxins in the environment, nutrient levels, there are lots of things. And the other thing is probably for every child it's a little bit different. So we see the end result, but just like you can have headaches, but for some people it's a migraine, for some people it's from a sinus headache, from some people it's muscle tension from being on the computer. And so we need to find out for you what's causing your headache, right? Because if it's, muscle tension, then the sinus pill isn't going to do it for you.
Right.
So kind of the same thing with autism is we're learning more about how for each individual person, we need to understand for that person what the problem is in order to try to help them.
And the autism spectrum they're discovering is getting longer and longer. So many people who you would never think are autistic might be on the spectrum because they have certain symptoms. And now I don't want to get into anything controversial like vaccines or anything, but I was told that some people believe that when you give a small child, 10 or 20 different vaccines within the same period of time, that's not a good thing. What do you think about that? That they should stretch it out over some time?
It is very controversial. Like you said, there are some people on one side of the spectrum who think that vaccines are always bad, and there are other people who think that vaccines are always good. But the reality is that it's important, and each parent really does need to speak with their doctor and have a good conversation about it. There's lots of information out there that can be kind of scary, but it's important.
Well, listen, we're going to take a short break, so we will be right back. Don't go away. Dave Nassani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too, Thrive to Stay Alive as a Caregiver. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. He now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his amazing caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first, before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out,
thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's my life too. Thrive and stay alive as a caregiver will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere and at caregiverdave.com.
And we're back on the Caregiver Dave Show with Dr. Deb Matthews and my lovely co-host Adrienne Gruberg. And Dr. Deb is a functional medicine guru, I like to call her, because she's just different from a lot of doctors that are out there. And we're having a conversation on why she's so different and what does it mean, and can we learn something from her that will really improve our lives, especially caregivers who are, need so much help. 30% of them die, the rest of them are hospitalized. And so how does, you talked about cortisol before, but it sounds like cortisol does a lot of different things. It affects our sleep, our mood, our energy, and long-term health, and it affects other hormones. Do you have anything else you want to tell us about cortisol? Because you didn't talk about it very much.
Yeah, okay. So cortisol is a regulating hormone. It regulates most of your other hormones. It regulates your immune system. It regulates your sleep-wake cycle so that you can sleep soundly at night and have energy during the day. It regulates your blood sugar. So it's really, really important. And that's why when we are stressed and cortisol is impacted, it can impact so many different areas of our life and so many different aspects of our health. And when we talk about how it impacts some of our other hormones, I think this is really important. So one of the hormones that's really important for how we feel is our thyroid hormone. And our thyroid sits right at the bottom of our neck. It sets our metabolic rate. And if your thyroid's not doing a good job, and you don't have the right amount of thyroid hormone, there's a whole list of symptoms. You feel tired, you gain weight, you can feel cold all the time, constipated, your hair can start to fall out or get dry and change its texture, you can have dry skin, you don't feel right, but because all of these symptoms are what we call non-specific, meaning different things can cause you to feel tired, different things can cause you to gain weight. So sometimes it can be hard to get a good diagnosis. And sometimes you can go into your doctor and say, gosh, I got all these symptoms. I wonder, doctor, if it could be my thyroid. And your doctor can measure a thyroid test, and usually they just measure a screening test. But if that test comes back normal, you'll be told that you're fine. And this is part of my personal story too, because for 10 years, I was tired all the time. Like sleep was my favorite hobby. And, but at night, by the time my kids went to sleep, I was done. Like, I don't care if there was spaghetti sauce splattered all over my kitchen floor after supper. It was just going to have to wait until the morning because I had nothing left in me to mop up the floor at night. And when I would go into the doctor, I was always told that it was normal. Even though I had an enlarged thyroid gland, when I would be working at the hospital, other doctors would look at my neck and say, your thyroid gland is big. You should go get that checked. I had a little bit of a goiter or an enlarged thyroid. But it took 10 years before finally it got bad enough that the test was outside of the range. And then finally I got diagnosed and I got treated. And initially I got treated with the standard treatment. It's called Synthroid. That's the standard medicine that everybody gets. Yeah, it didn't make me feel any better. I felt no different. And when I finally learned how to practice functional medicine in this more natural approach, I realized that there are other things besides just Synthroid that can be done in order to help our thyroid. And I felt tremendously better. But one of the things that I learned that I think is relevant for caregivers is when you have stress in your life, and that makes your cortisol level go up, it makes it so that your body can't use the thyroid hormone properly. So even if your thyroid gland is fine and it's making thyroid hormone, or if you're taking the pill, so you're getting, the thyroid hormone replacement, when cortisol is off because of stress, it gets in the way. And so your cells can't use that thyroid hormone. They can't activate it into something called T3 thyroid hormone. So you still feel tired and you struggle with your weight, and it affects your mood. So you can be moody or, depressed. It affects your memory, like you can have brain fog and it's just hard to compute things in your head, and you start to think maybe this is early signs of dementia, but it can be one of the signs of stress. And so if your thyroid test looks fine and your doctor says everything is normal, one of the things to think about is, are there more things that you could be doing in order to help protect yourself from the harmful effects of cortisol in order to allow your body to use the thyroid hormone better?
Tell me. I have no thyroid.
That sounds
in
serious.
1976, I was very lucky. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
And that's what I have too, yes.
And that my father's the one that noticed the swelling. I had been living in Africa, and I came back, and he just picked up on a difference. My husband didn't see it, but my father saw it. And I went to a client who saw that I was scratching the front of my legs, and her boyfriend had Graves' disease. So she sent me to his physician, and I avoided surgery and everything else. And it's been since 1976 that I've been, treated for this. But I gained 40 pounds in a month.
Oh my goodness. So, you knew that something was wrong, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like even if you didn't know what it was. And so what I see happen a lot is, this thyroid problem is most common in women. So women are more affected by thyroid problems than men. 90% of hypothyroidism or low thyroid function is because of Hashimoto's, which is what we have. That's when your immune system makes a mistake and antibodies start attacking your thyroid gland. Instead of the antibodies are supposed to attack germs. So then they damage the thyroid gland over time, and then, it's not working. You have to take thyroid replacement therapy. But unfortunately, a lot of times when women march into the doctor to say, look, something's wrong. I don't feel good. I'm tired all the time. I'm, depressed. If that number hasn't moved outside of the range just yet, you get told everything is normal. And that is so frustrating to be kind of dismissed, like you're not really heard. And I hear this every day from women who are so fed up. They're so frustrated. They know something is wrong. They're just looking for somebody to help them find out what it is. And so sometimes it really is full-blown hypothyroidism, like what you have and what I have. And sometimes, though, it's not full-blown hypothyroidism. And that's why they get told everything is fine, because that lab test is still normal. But sometimes the problem is that cortisol, the stress hormone, is just getting in the way so that thyroid hormone can't work. Or sometimes people are taking thyroid replacement and that cortisol still gets in the way. And so that's not a disease. There's no drug for this. And so that's why your doctor isn't really going to look for it. They don't look for cortisol levels unless somebody may have a disease. There's like tumors you could have that make way too much cortisol, but that's a life-threatening disease. And, that's very rare. So if the problem is just too much stress, they might say, well, I think it's just stress. But that's not so helpful, right? I mean, we all know when we're stressed. That doesn't help us fix the problem. Right. But functional medicine doctors can actually measure cortisol levels. And typically we do it in a blood test, or not a blood test, in a saliva test or in a urine test. And the reason that we do it in saliva or urine is because we can do it multiple times over the same day. Because what's supposed to happen is cortisol goes up in the wee hours of the morning. And remember, cortisol is like long-acting adrenaline. So it's like you get this little adrenaline rush and your eyes pop open and you leap out of your bed ready to start your day. And then it gradually goes down over the day so that you're calm and you're relaxed and you can fall asleep and sleep soundly through the night. But what happens a lot is it gets all flipped around and backwards. So it doesn't go up in the morning, and then you're pressing snooze a few times, and you need a cup of coffee.
My wife has insomnia. She has to take sleeping pills. Could it be that?
Because if it's too high at night, it's like too much adrenaline, and then you can't fall asleep. And then when you finally do fall asleep, you end up, getting another little surge at 2:00 in the morning, and then there you are, you're wide awake, and you can't go back to sleep. And another really common pattern that we see is that afternoon crash. 2:00, 3:00 in the afternoon, when you just want another cup of coffee or some sugar or something to get you through supper time. And I remember for me, this was way back now when I was in college, in medical school, I would leave medical school to go to my part-time job. So it would have been about 4:30 in the afternoon, and I could not drive. I was so tired. I would fall asleep at the red light. I would be so scared I was going to drive off the road. It was dangerous. It's like drowsy driving is just as bad as drunk driving, So I would have to come out of school, sit in my car, and have a 10-minute power nap. And then I would wake up and I would be ready to go. But if I didn't have that power nap, I couldn't function. It was really bad. And I am not the only person. I mean, this is not an uncommon story, even if it's maybe not quite that bad. But so many of us need that afternoon pick-me-up.
Sure. Listen, we're going to take another break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Our featured speaker is a best-selling author who has written numerous books and articles. He's a speaker, life coach, and host of Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver radio program. He frequently appears on television and radio shows all across the country and has even shared the stage with Suzanne Summers at Harvard. But his most important role is caregiver to his beautiful wife, Charlene, for over 22 years. Please welcome Mr. Dave Nasani!
I want to share with you a love story. In a couple of weeks, my wife and I will be celebrating 44 years of being together. My wife, Charlene, and I had a fairy tale, storybook, romance, courtship, and marriage for the first 21 years of our lives together. One day, out of nowhere, my wife has a headache, the headache of her life. She suffered a massive stroke, and it left her severely speech impaired and paralyzed on the right side. And in that moment, our world turned upside down. I got to tell you, the next 2 years was like a living hell. I just didn't know what to do. I felt guilty most of the time. I became a caregiver. I didn't even know what a caregiver was. I was experiencing the same problems that other caregivers experience. If you don't take care of you, I can't take care of her. Well, that's why I wrote the book. Now I can teach other caregivers. I'm living proof that you can thrive as a caregiver. My wife and I travel now all over the world sharing our story. One day, life is going to call upon you to be the captain of your boat. Heck, you might be saving your own life. Thank you.
And we're back on the Caregiver Dave Show with Dr. Deb Matthews and Adrian Gruberg, my co-host. I wanted to ask you, so how do you control the cortisone?
Yeah.
No, cortisol.
Yeah, cortisone is like if you need to get a shot, because you got to.
Sure.
So it's like the drug version of cortisol.
So how do you control it? You said that you can't really do anything. What do you do to control that, and how did you control your own?
Yeah. So you can't necessarily, like you said, you can't make all of your stresses go away. So if I could write you a prescription for a vacation in Tahiti on the beach, that might help, but Blue Cross Blue Shield isn't going to pay for that, right? So, but getting away from it all, taking a vacation, having respite, having an afternoon of retail therapy where you can go shopping or, getting away, that's helpful. Another one is simplifying, because, the reality is for some of us, we do it to ourselves.
Is that simple, really, doctor?
Well, it's not. It is simple. It is simple. It's just not easy, right? But if we can simplify, if we can not try to do everything perfect, if we can say no sometimes, I know these are all things that you've talked about, right? But saying no, setting boundaries.
Them. You're not writing them a prescription. You're counseling them. You're giving them advice. You're telling them what they should do, how they should think, how they should maybe adjust their attitude. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Those things are really important.
You're almost a psychiatrist now, or psychologist.
But what we think, and this is really, really important, what we think, our thoughts, affect our physical body. So if you are if you're walking down a dark alley and you are imagining that somebody's going to jump out and stab you and rob you, your body reacts as though somebody's there. It doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality, right? So if you're caught in those negative thoughts, worrying and fretting and, miserable thoughts, you make things work for yourself. So if you're able to catch yourself in that negative thinking and turn your thoughts to something positive, that grateful feeling, it really can turn things around. So like I said, there's no medicine for this. There's no drug that anybody can give you, but it's really, really important. It is simple. These are all simple steps that everybody's heard before. None of this is brand new. It's just so important. And it's so important to not having a heart attack or getting cancer right? I mean, these are the things that we can do to protect ourselves from those really harmful effects of stress.
Yeah, they say you are what you eat, and somehow I think you're going to start talking about food and diet because, I'm just starting to think of what's simple and what's hard and what's easy, and people have trouble controlling what they stick in this little mouth of ours. So go ahead, let me have it. Let me hear about the diet and the food. And then after that, we'll talk about exercise.
Let's talk about what do we want to eat when we're stressed? Like, who has their head in the fridge at 10 o'clock at night saying, I'm sure there's some leftover broccoli and Brussels sprouts back here, right? No one. When we're stressed, we want comfort food. We want to treat ourselves. We're trying to make ourselves feel better. So sugar and junk food, right? I mean, that's what we want to make ourselves feel better. So first of all, when we are stressed, we often don't make such good food choices, or we don't feel like chopping the vegetables, right? We just want something quick and easy because we've already had it. So taking a few moments to eat the healthier foods is really, really important because your body needs the nutrients in the food, the vitamins and minerals, etc., in order to be able to make your hormones and in order to generate energy to be healthy. So we need the vegetables, right? All the different colors of vegetables, especially the green leafy vegetables, healthy servings of fruit. We need to get enough protein in our diet. And one of the things that's maybe a little bit surprising that's really important is that we need fat. So how many years have we been telling people, eat a low-fat diet, right? But your hormones, all of estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, they're all made out of cholesterol. So cholesterol is not a terrible thing. You need cholesterol to make estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, and vitamin D. And vitamin D is really good for you. Your brain is made up of fat. And so having a low-fat diet isn't really the best thing for all of us. But it's really important what kind of fat we're eating, because we're not talking about what's in the deep fryer down there at, the fast food restaurant. But healthy fats would be things like extra virgin olive oil and nuts like walnuts and almonds. Avocados are a really healthy fat. These are things that are actually really good for us. And they're a good thing, right? It's fun to eat a handful of almonds and avocado, right? Who doesn't like guacamole?
And you overdo it, though. Fun. And you overdo the nuts. My wife says I eat too many.
Yeah, that's one of the hard things, right? Is once you get going in the nuts, like it's hard to stop sometimes, isn't it?
3 or 4 handfuls. That's what I like.
Yeah. But so those are all really important healthy foods for us to eat. And maybe one other thing, if I could say, about what we should not eat too much of is the starchy carbohydrates. So all the white processed stuff, the white bread and the white rice and all that. When we eat too much of that, that makes our blood sugar spike up. And that blood sugar spike up and then it crashes down, and the whoop and down of the blood sugar is hard, and it causes cortisol to be released. So even if you don't have stress, eating those kinds of foods can trigger more cortisol release. So go easy on the starchy, the starchy carbohydrates, whole grains.
What happens if you do eat too many nuts?
If you do eat too many nuts, Well, they do have a fair amount of calories. They're good for you, so it's the healthy kind of calories. But if you're eating all the regular calories you would have done, and you're eating a whole bag full of walnuts, maybe that's a bit much. But I'm with you on there. Once
you
you
didn't
get going
mention
right,
this
they're
stuff.
crunchy.
I assume
yeah.
we should drink, 8 glasses of water a day or something like
So
that?
the standard recommendation is 8-ounce glasses of water, but it depends, right? If you're out in the heat,
Oh, they're
and
only 8
you need
ounce, so
more.
that's 64 ounces. That's
Yeah,
1 liter?
that's kind of a ballpark place to start.
Okay.
But
Depends
drinking
on your
lots of
weight
water.
too, right?
Yeah, if you're a bigger person, if it's a hot day, if you're exercising and you're sweaty, there's lots of variations here. But for most of us, we need to drink more water. And I'm going to be honest and say this is the one that I struggle with. I don't mind eating green leafy vegetables and I can feel grateful, but I don't know, I find it hard to drink enough water. And one of the tricks that I found that worked for me is I got a special glass a water bottle, and it's got like that rubberized stuff around it so that it's not going to break, and it's a fun color, and for whatever reason in my psychology, it's working for me to help me drink more water. So if any one of these things is hard for you, find a little trick, find a little gimmicky thing that just makes it a little bit more fun, and that makes it easier.
And some people like ice cold water, some people like room temperature, some people like hot water. Some people say, oh no, you shouldn't drink cold water when you eat. What temperature water should we do?
I would say let's not worry too much about it. Yes, some people say the cold water affects how your body, digests the rest of your food. But I think drink your water however you prefer it, and we won't worry too much about it.
What kind of a doctor are you?
Drink your water.
We're going to take another break. We'll be right back. Do not go away. Anytime we suffer loss, we grieve. And a lot of people don't realize what even the grief process is. But it could be 5 to 7 steps ranging from denial, I don't believe this is happening, anger, oh my gosh, I'm so upset this is happening, to a form of bargaining, how can I get out of this, to depression, which is a very serious thing because that often leads to suicide. And then finally, after you realize you have no more control over your situation, and you're totally okay with the new normal that it brings, that wonderful, wonderful place called acceptance. I saw you breathe during that break. We're back with Dr. Deb Matthews and Adrian Gruberg. I'm Dave Nassani on the Caregiver Dave Show. I hate to do it, but let's talk about it. Exercise. What is the definition of exercise? If I walk into my mailbox, is that exercise? I mean, what's the minimum and maximum exercise that you recommend as a functional medicine doctor?
Yeah. Well, here's the good news. If our goal is we're trying to reduce stress or protect our bodies from the effects of stress, the exercise that you do does not have to be like hardcore. You don't have to run a marathon or join a boot camp or, huff and puff and get all sweaty and feel like you're going to cough up your lungs. That kind of really hardcore exercise is actually a stress on your system. So that's not what we need for this purpose. So going outside for a walk, that counts as exercise. And, if you're not exercising at all, one of the best ways to kind of get yourself started is to get yourself a pedometer. You can buy them real cheap and stick them on your belt. Most people's phones have them, or if you've got one of those Fitbit watches or something, something that counts your steps. And step 1 is just see how many steps you're taking on a given day. And that's your starting point. Maybe it's 1,000 steps or 2,000 steps. And what we find is if you start paying attention to how many steps you're taking, you'll just naturally take more, even if it means you'll walk around the long way to get to the fridge for your snack. But we just naturally take more. And then you make it a little game for yourself and try to do more steps. And the ultimate goal is 10,000 steps a day. And what you find is in order to get 10,000 steps a day, you're going to have to go for a walk. That's kind of the only way that you're going to get there. But the other thing that's really good for all of us is resistance exercise. That's muscle building exercise, right? Whether you're using weights or those machines at the gym or the exercise rubber bands or even just your body weight, things like push-ups or squats. when you strengthen your muscles, what you do, it helps to prevent frailty, right? Because naturally with age, our muscles get thinner, just like our bones get thinner with age. And then if you trip and fall down, you're more likely to snap like a twig, and you can't be a caregiver if you're lying, in bed with a broken hip or a broken leg or something like that. So for all of us, doing that kind of muscle building exercise is really important. And, back 100 years ago when we had to scoop the hay to feed the cows, we were doing so much of that hard work. And nowadays, pushing the vacuum cleaner, I guess, is a little bit of work, but for most of our lives,
Yeah.
we don't have that kind of, heavy lifting. It's just not part of our lives. And so that's why doing some of that kind of exercise is really important to protect us, keep us healthy. So for helping with stress, any kind of exercise doesn't have to be hardcore, but moving your body is really, really helpful for reducing stress. And it'll help you sleep better too.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do for stress. Anything else that you can think of that would help with the stress?
Well, meditation is a really wonderful one. And when I try to talk to people about meditation, usually what I hear is, I tried it and, I couldn't do it. It's hard. There's lots of reasons why people don't care for meditation. And I would liken it to doing jogging, right? You're not going to get up off the couch and go jog for 5 miles. You're going to get up and you're going to walk, and then maybe you'll jog to the next block and walk the rest of the way. You got to get started. So a good way to get started is mindfulness, which is where you're just aware of your surroundings, and you can do things like one simple exercise is to just look at each of the 4 corners of the room that you're in, and you just put all of your attention to one corner, and what color is the paint, and is there a cobweb up there, and the lighting, etc. And then you turn to the next one, etc. It's just a way to get all the other, helter-skelter going on in your brain kind of shut down just for a moment. It's super simple. It only takes a minute. It's just a really quick and easy way. And what I teach my patients all the time is, on your phone, you can download apps. One is called Calm, one is called Insight Timer, Breathe. There's all these different apps.
TV too.
Yeah, and they're free to download, and then they give you these little breathing exercises and guided meditation, just little things to help. And the way that these help is you make it a habit. So just like, you can't exercise once, right? You got to kind of do it, on a regular basis. And if you eat one salad, you're not getting very far. But, if you start to eat salads more regularly. So the same thing here, on a regular basis, if you can, even if you start with 3 minutes a day, just something to make it a new habit, it can be really, really, really helpful. And for some reason, it's not valued in our culture, right? Everybody knows they're supposed to eat their vegetables, and they know they're supposed to exercise. We know that. But this taking care of ourselves is just as important. But somehow, if you go sit on a bench and you just breathe, you feel like you really ought to be, unloading the dishwasher or, cutting the grass, or it feels unproductive.
That's called guilt.
That's called guilt. And so, right,
Guilt is very stressful, isn't it?
It
Yes.
It is. But it's important, and we all need to take care of ourselves. That's just as important as eating your broccoli and putting on your gym shoes.
Well, Dr. Deb, I can talk to you for another whole hour and maybe 2 more, but unfortunately the time is up, and it goes so fast when you're having fun, isn't it? How can we get a hold of you and find out more? Or we didn't get a chance to talk about your book. My gosh. So real fast, book and contact information.
Yeah. So I have a book about women's hormones. It's called This Is Not Normal. And anybody who would like can get a free download at isityourhormones.com. And my website for more information is signaturewellness.org.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, short and sweet. That a girl. Adrian, you can get a hold of her at thecaregiverspace.org. You can get a hold of me at caregiverdave.com, or I have a new website now, davenasani.com, or if that's too hard to spell, just go to, I don't know. I've got so many things going to that, gettinghosed.net. How's that? Listen, thank you so much for tuning in, and again, thank you, Dr. Deb. and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again.